Hi everybody, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to continue forward here and showcase a bit of extra progress with my scene that I'm putting together inside of Unreal Engine. However, along the way, I've been making procedural templates for the props and natural scenery you might find in an open landscape that I'm putting together. And what better way of procedurally crafting things than using Houdini for such a method? For instance, I had to make a variety of small rocks that I want to procedurally instance inside of my scene with PCG. Um, and to do that, I made a collection of variants through the modeling tools that Houdini provides, and then texture them with the new Copernicus material template setup that the software offers. It's something that I don't see too many people using, so I thought it'd be cool to kind of go over how I went about, making these textures and um, what sort of uses you can solicit when going after a traditional high to low baking game art approach, such as it is. I mean, I should say that Copernicus is much more than that, of course. It's more of a 2D, 3D hybrid between material authoring, but also uh, using the 3D uh, power that Houdini offers and combines the two to get a variety of different results. I mean, I can work with volumetrics or fluid simulations, and the list goes on. So this is just scratching the surface, but that being said, I thought I could try to uh, break this down to chunks and kind of go after um, what I'm doing here. So to start, I guess before I talk about this shader tree here, um, I'll just elaborate a bit on my modeling approach. It's nothing too fancy, but um, yeah, inside of the SOPs OBJ context, I'll start with just basic shapes. So here I begin with a quad sphere generator, and um, I craft some sort of basic shape using a mountain node. You can play with the amplitude or the element size to get something looking misshapen. I might use normals to fix the orientation, and then get an ISO offset node to convert that to a volume, scatter points along the volume, and then fracture it with a Baroni fracture node according to those points. So essentially, I'm getting these crisscrossing lines where it's breaking the basic shape into different chunks. The whole thing might be stretched to a degree and then remeshed finally, so we're able to see those chunks become more apparent, and the mesh is broken into these contiguous sections. And then for each section, I'm able to run it through a for each loop where I'm transforming the chunk away from the others according to a transform from centroid node. The scale is also derived from the iteration value of this metadata node. So you can see in this function here I wrote, we're able to stretch it to some degree, and then we're left with a shape that is a bit more random with its silhouette. That shape is then remeshed into a voxel-based piece, and then I can, of course, flatten it. I could imagine along the y-axis there's a white to black gradient, and I can play with how much I can squish it back to a shape that's more rock-like in comparison. And then from there, I pump out 4 different variants using these methods, and I cache them. So each cache contains a different style of rock. Each one is grouped, merged back together. So we get our pile of different variants. And then I love this node, Mesh Sharpen. I just take the topology and I sharpen it along its curvatures, so we get something a bit more sharp and rock-like each piece. And then from there, you break it into two different categories or trees, one for high poly, one for low poly. For the high poly, I'm able to just, once again, for each loop, each section together, I sharpen it to some degree, I remesh it, so we're able to, get something that's like very sculpted, let's say, in its appearance. Although I am not doing any sculpting whatsoever. You know, that is something that we're trying to avoid for the sake of time. But yeah, you can see, like, for example, this guy, we get these little, these fine details for each rock. And I think they really do hold up pretty well for something, that's so small, like a prop this size. If it was something more hero-esque in appearance, I might actually do a bit of sculpting, but for now, let's keep it as it is. And yep, again, I then split each variant accordingly, and I file cache it for ease of use. Each version is a different variant, and each one will then go into a null that is what I'm pointing to inside of my Copernicus network. You could also do something where you're overlaying attributes inside of the high poly mesh. So I can then solicit that custom attribute inside of the high to low baking process. So anything that's on the high poly will get baked onto the low poly, and I can use that as like a mask or something that drives another set of functions within Copernicus, or COPS, as they say. In this case, I didn't end up using this, but I could run a measure curvature node, and that will automatically place white masking values along the edges of the object according to the parameters you set. Same with concavity. So if there's a region where, ambient occlusion might gather, you would then play with those values, and it would give you another mask that you can use within your setup. So once that's all done, I have that ready, and I go on the other hand side. With my low poly, for each piece, I'll reduce it, auto unwrap it so I get my UV islands, and I'll then do a bit of mesh cleanup if I needed to, and I'm left with my pile of RAWKS, and then a textile density node that will automatically equalize all the islands together so they have exactly the same textile density for each surface. And then a UV layout will pack it all within the same 0 to 1 space. So I can create something of an atlas texture, or have all my variants follow the same mastering material texture. And then from there, you split everything accordingly. Once again, you cache it. I do another normal adjustment, points by vertex angle, so it performs well with a baking setup. And yeah, I'm able to get my RAWKS all set up. In the end, when you want to bring this into a Unreal Engine, I would transform it. So I size up each mesh times 10 to match the scale in Unreal. And then another handy node was the LOD create. So with this, I'm able to take my meshes here and automatically drive down the decimation for each LOD, and then export that as an FBX, which contains that information. So in this case, I'll have 2 extra LODs. This one 40% less dense, and this one is like an 8%. This 8% the amount of triangles that LOD 0 would have. So this way I can then have an extra bit of optimization inside of Unreal. Um, Also, I export it without textures, and I might turn off ASC2 formats if I want to bring it into Blender for later. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I have this. I state no consolidation with my shader. So there's no extra draw calls if I bring this into Unreal. And then I generate LODs. And I do this for each piece. So we're left with 4 different FBX files. So then, yeah, finally, with the mesh done, I'll come into Copernicus. And this might, on the outset, if you're not familiar with this sort of workflow or Substance Designer, let's say, it might seem like a cobweb of different wires, and it's like, how do I even unpack this sort of thing? But it's really not too complicated, I think, if we just break it down into each cluster and understand like what the overall goal is. It might be more straightforward that way. I mean, to start, if you're doing a high to low bake inside of COPS, the first thing you do is drop what's called a bake setup. So if I do this, you'll see that I'm given a template here, which is my low poly SOP import. So this points to the objects that I want to bring into COPS for baking purposes. I would point to my low poly null. You can see like rock 01 low, and this will pop up within COPS. Bam. Same thing goes with the high poly. If I wanted to find its high poly brother, I would do that, and then from there it'll just automatically bake the normal maps or anything else that you choose to output here. And you can see that it offers a pretty healthy amount of flexible options here. We have curvature, we have thickness, you have your world normal and position. These are very important. Anything that I want to have outputs from my bake, I'll just check this box. And you can see I did a bit of edits here to accompany the scene I'm trying to put together, but I'll change the world space to signed. I'll change the position to absolute. So they're all sharing, each variant is sharing the same position space according to each other. Like nothing is different. I would keep tangent space where it is, offset 0 to 1. And I might also, again, utilize like the flexibility that Houdini offers, which is, creating your own parameters or making subnetworks or master controls for driving different tool sets. For example, I could create a float parameter that is called like curvature max distance, and I would copy this parameter and paste it into the input for curvature where it says max distance. I would paste relative references, and from there I can then adjust this guy. And if I do this approach for every single baking node, we can then have a master control that drives the curvature for all of the variants at the same time, instead of me going back and forth and doing things, one after the other, and obviously missing a step along the way and having a mismatch in my texture set. So yeah, you can do that with AO samples or anything you want. Just copy a parameter, paste it into this for having some extra flexibility. But anyway, that's I won't go over every single feature here, but I think if you're familiar with 3D texturing, it should be pretty straightforward. So with that in mind, I have everything baked the same from each output here, and first step is to layer things together. So if I have my normal maps, I want to combine everything together according to the alpha mask for that bake. So if I take the first, bake geometry textures node, and I have the foreground be the next normal map here, I would then use its outputted alpha mask to drive its placement on this blend. Again, pretty similar to Designer, if you're familiar with that sort of thing. And then from there, I might also drop an extrapolate boundaries node and use the combined alpha mask to point the fill area, which would then drive a dilation effect going away from the borders of the UV islands. So this way we can mitigate a large degree of the seams you might see along your standard high to low bake, and get rid of any extra funkiness. So from there, we have our output, and you can see that I do the same process for every output. So my alpha, AO, my curvature with some extra remapping, as well as like my position and my world normal. And they all end with a null node here. And that's because I'm trying to, for the sake of efficiency, keep the cable overlaps to a minimum. If I do this, I can then drop down, let's say, like a fetch node. And with the fetch node, I can then point to the output for those textures. Let's say world normal out, same as this guy. If I press accept, I change it to RGB to match the format. I'm getting the same output from here, only it's targeted in this guy. So then I can then, drive it forward into something else. It's pretty much the same as like a named reroute node inside of Unreal, only we're doing the same thing with COPs. And this way I can, get away from all these cobwebs, overlaying node tree jibber jabbers that would make life pretty hard inside of a setup like this. But yeah, you can see I've done that approach with most things going forward, going into my curvature or my base color. And from here, like a lot of the inputs for, like, let's say a rock texture could be driven by like a what's called a cloud noise. There's tons of different noises here. If I type in just noise, you'll get all these different styles. Cloud noise, I think, is one of the best for rocks or other natural looking sceneries. But if I take my position and I drive it into the POS input for cloud noise, it's sort of like, it's almost like a triplanar effect, with my noise following the curvature of my mesh. And I'm getting away from a ton of different UV seams where the island boundaries would intersect. So you can see if I delete that, might be a little hard to see, but we start getting these seams here where the values are not carrying forward to the next part of the mesh in the world space setting. But if I turn this off, I can sort of get away from that to some degree. Not always, but it really helps, I think. And with that in mind, it also keeps the noise values, I think, scaled in a more equal fashion, just to keep things a bit more uniform in that sense. But yeah, these noises, they'll drive ramps. So color ramps will be input from there with some extra contrast. You can see that it's driving colors that are then blended together according to the noises that I choose. I can do some pretty cool stuff too. For instance, I can take a cloud noise like this that's being driven through the position fetch and then distort it with a second noise. So this fractal will drive a slope direction that will go into the direction for a distort node. And I can play with the scale and get some extra looking just funkiness and detail along along those values. Same as a slope blur inside of Designer. It's pretty handy here too. And so that could be like a mask for something else, and so on and so forth. I overlay curvatures with some extra noise, color correct it, and can do some pretty fun stuff. Like I take the ambient occlusion for my rock, and I use that as a mask to drive another set of noises that could be ramped together to create a look that's like, let's say, lichen or moss, and then blend that on top with that mask driven through my AO channel. So yeah, and I can adjust the samples and distortion and so on. It's pretty cool. From there, tone mapping is done and some extra corrections are ready. I also get the mask for the moss for use later inside of my normals. If I convert this sort of thing into a height texture and then bake it into normal maps, I can then combine normals together to get some extra detail where the base color for the moss might be. And for instance, if I take this, you can see I'm again crafting some noises, distorting them, converting it to a normal map, and then I combine it with the base normals from before. So we were left with some surface detail. And then if I take the mask for the moss, convert it to a height, which I can remap and play with the scale to some degree, I can then combine it, and I'm left with something that is pretty easygoing looking moss normal map, and then have that fall into the output for normals. Kind of see what it's doing there if I adjust these values a bit. So yeah, I mean, I'm just scratching the surface here, but that's kind of the gist of it. Roughness too, if I overlay my curvatures and I play with some remaps, I'm left with a range that could be used for, for something like roughness. The edges are more shiny, the cavities are more opaque and matte in appearance. And then with a preview material, I can see all this, of course. This is just a method of seeing your outputted textures in one place. If I fetch the geometry, let's say from my rock, my rock low input, and I put it into here, you can see I'm getting the low poly result if I choose to preview this. So pretty handy. And then once that's done, if I'm happy with my results, I'll drop down a ROP image node, and this will just output everything together. So I can choose my AOVs. If I say add AOVs from input, it'll just give me everything automatically, and I can pick and choose which ones I want to output into my folder. For now, we're just using base color, roughness, normal, just simple stuff. So I'll just, I can delete the ones I'm not using, and then choose the color space to raw or bake to display view, so it matches what I'm seeing in the viewport. And from there, I would then, change the output to some degree. So, for instance, I could say like small rocks 01, and then this would be layer here .png. And the syntax is important because without it, we won't be able to get the AOVs from our file layout output to the folder. So make sure you have this, and if that's what you're working towards. You can see in my other one, these were my settings, and then I just render to disk, and I get my PNGs. Simple as that. From there, we move into Photoshop. We can, do any final adjustments there, and then overlay the stacked textures together. So let's say my roughness goes to the alpha channel for a base color, or I could output way fancier stuff. I can get masks from Copernicus to drive like pixel depth offset or transmission, subsurface scattering, you name it. It's pretty exciting to see just how many different things you can do with this approach. And that's pretty much the gist of it. Yeah, I had some fun putting this together, and like I said, I'm just scratching the surface, but I plan on using this approach for follow-up natural sceneries in my environment. So stay posted, and I'm gonna continue posting my progress in that regard. Here we are inside of my Unreal scene, and you can see that I've brought in these small rocks accordingly along the sloping edges of my terrain. They're scattered using a PCG template, and their size, their density is derived through the attributes that I've put in place there. And as well, the textures, they're being blended into the underlying terrain according to the runtime virtual texture that I've output for the base color. So where the point of contact is made on the object itself with the landscape, you'll have a soft gradient effect where it'll blend its own base color into that underlying rock texture. That way, they're looking a bit more, natural. They sit well on the landscape itself, and it all just kind of comes together in a more serene and natural way. We can kind of see what it's doing too. If I go into my material, we'll find that I have my variants here. This shader is really quite simple. I'm just taking the runtime virtual texture, like so, and I'm getting the world height output from my RVT volume, and I'm subtracting it from the world space position along the z-axis. I'm adding in the object bounds for each rock, so where each PCG rock is placed, you'll get the bounds for that, and I'll multiply its height accordingly, and then subtract it from this setup here. I might also divide it to solicit a soft gradient or control the fall off effect within that 0 to 1 range, and then clamp it with a saturate node so it stays between 0 and 1 for free, and then invert it so we're getting the correct direction. And then from there, I have my output. I'll lerp it with the base color, and that will go into my shader. So, for instance, if I turn this into unlit, and I create this guy, put into emissive, you'll see that, every rock will have like a soft gradient kind of going up from its local space. So we're getting like the bottom half of it will be more of the RVT base color. The top half will be its own texture from Houdini cops, and we'll have a better sense of variation there. I go into the instance too. You can see that if I play with these gradient values, I can control the amount of spacing there is. the for the fall off effect, its height level to begin with, and yeah, we'll have something that looks pretty interesting. Pretty straightforward. So that's really uh, the approach I had in mind, and for now, I'm going to continue going forward, adding in, larger boulders, more like primary shapes that can break up the look of the terrain, and do that through the use of Houdini if I can help it. So we'll see what happens there. And additionally, I also crafted a far off grass effect that was based off of the procedural grass that I put together for the foreground. Only the background is not so much, these oscillating grass cards. It's more of it's actually a very low poly mesh that's following the curvature of the terrain. And I'm using a method that involves dithering anti-alias nodes to sort of mimic the look of grass swaying in the breeze at a distance. You can see that these speckles here um, along the curvatures of the grass slopes are in fact just dithering results, and those are sort of panning across the surface using the same Niagara-based particle texture that's driving the look of the wind. So if I tie that in with some world position offsetting, I can get a look that's very natural and suits the transition between foreground and background elements quite well. And yeah, it's been pretty fun putting that together. So there you have it. That's just one small example of leveraging Houdini's powerful toolset along with the COPS texturing pipeline to put together these assets for use inside of a real-time project, or really anything that suits your fancy. If you like this video, please feel free to like and subscribe. I'll definitely be following up with future updates, so please feel free to stay tuned for that. And of course, if you have any questions, just drop a comment below and I will certainly get back to you about anything whatsoever. So thanks again for watching, guys, and hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.